estate, so his military estate. This is where people in the military live currently amid concerns that the roofs of hundreds of barracks and training facilities may be at risk of collapse. And it's feared that material cheaper than concrete was used for construction in the 50s and the 90s, especially in the public sector. So actually, if you really look at this, it isn't just military accommodation, hospitals and schools as well. There is also concern over dozens, like I've said, of those schools and indeed hospitals. With me now is the military expert, and of course is joining me now to give his thoughts on all of this. It is Chip Chapman. Chip, look, thank you very much for joining me, Chip. What do you make of the state of our military accommodation? Because you are former head of counter terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, aren't you, Chip? And this must be a damning indictment to people like you.
Well, it's not necessarily a damning indictment of me, but we know that there is a problem. You've seen the best of the army, and that's why you're there. It's the bit about the pageantry, the pride and the pomp. And we saw the best in operations with Sudan. But the reality is that last year, 39,000 of those who were in service accommodation paid the minimal charge. That's grade 4, and grade 1 is the highest. And 4,360 paid no charge because the accommodation wasn't good enough at all. Now, obviously, there are large building programs, and there's been one since 2006, the project Allenby Connaught. But like all these things, there were legacy problems. It doesn't excuse it. And the problem is that recruiting and retaining people is part of the accommodation is part of that recruiting and retaining people. And we're not doing that because the outflow is greater than the inflow at the moment. And we know from the satisfaction ratings, both for those in married quarters, those who are married, and those in single accommodation, it's very low with the state of the maintenance.
Well, the fact is that the pay isn't particularly great, lower down in the armed forces, is it? And then you've got accommodation for relatives and friends and families they've got rising damp, they've got catastrophically awful situations there. There's also believed to be something like parasites in the water. I've reported on all of this. I mean, it's literally unlivable. It's literally unlivable. And then we've got barracks and training facilities that are apparently at risk of imminent collapse. And yet at the same time, our government feels perfectly content to renovate disused barracks so that people who arrived here illegally can live in them.
Well, they're two different budgets. One's the Home Office budget and one's the Defence budget, so you can't link the two together. And the cost drivers in Defence are pay, pensions, fuel costs and Category A equipment programmes, those over 400 million. But those which are catastrophic, and you've mentioned some of them in your piece there just now, Patrick, are things that we need to get to grip with, because all the things that you see in the Continuous Attitude Survey, and the last one was published in May 22, are all those things that you touched on. People are dissatisfied with pay, their work-life balance, the allowances pay, pensions, their accommodation. So there's a sort of whole catalyst of things which are really, really cheesing people off in the armed forces at the moment. They like the stuff they do in terms of supporting the coronation. They absolutely love going on operations with Sudan, but you won't retain them if you have bad accommodation, which we're not doing anything about.
Do you not think that it's actually a visible sign of decline, though, Chip, that we have our armed forces who we are sending out to fight and in some cases die or suffer catastrophic injuries at the behest of our government and at the behest of technically the royal family as well, and then we are asking them to live and train in buildings that, according to reports, might collapse at any moment?
Yeah, of course it's a sign of decline, and it's only when the catastrophic things happen that it hits the press. One of the things which contributes to this, in my opinion, is that we sold off the married quarters estate in 1996 and then leased it back, and there's lost money there for for example, the National Audit Office said that we've lost between £2 and £4 billion, which could have been reinvested by that decision, and the people we sold it to are actually now part of a private equity firm, and the government wanted to take the real estate back into MOD control in 2022. Haven't been able to do that at the moment because they think they'll lose a court case with a private equity firm and would be even more billions out of pocket from that decision.
Yeah, I just find it absolutely shocking. I take it, Chip, that you would urge the government to get to grips with all of this. I mean, again, if you ask the British public about the stuff that they really don't particularly want to pay for, right? I would really expect and anticipate that this is something that they really wouldn't mind taxpayers paying for, so that the people who we are training to go to the next conflict zone or keep us safe or keep our king safe at the coronation, which we will of course be broadcasting live here on Saturday, that those people don't have to lie in a bed at night and look up at the ceiling above them and wonder whether or not it's about to come down on top of them.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the Defence Infrastructure Organisation have to conduct that and ameliorate the situation behind that. But it's worth saying we're just not very good at managing money. This week it was shown by the Swedish Peace Institute that the sixth top military spender in the world is the UK Armed Forces. We need to do better with how we spend the money in an efficient way, and we've not been doing that well, both in accommodation and equipment procurement in the last 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Chip, thank you very much. That's former Head of Counter Terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Chip Chapman there, just responding to those reports that came through, very concerning reports that we have seen, haven't we, that there are disused military barracks which are indeed now being renovated and used for people who've come illegally across the Channel. We've got a boat in Dorset that's going to be used, a barge there. Now, that is the Home Office budget, and it is an important distinction that Chip Chapman made there, but that just shows how nimble and quickly we can move to renovate things and get suitable accommodation sorted, doesn't it? And then the flip side of it is that you have military wives and children living in accommodation with water pouring through the ceilings and, you know, rotting carpets, and they can't have, you know, toilets and baths and all of this stuff. In fact, they're also being told there might be parasites in some of the water. I mean, that is absolutely shocking. But then the people in the military themselves, the ones at their barracks and the ones who are in training facilities, now have to look up and wonder whether or not that ceiling is going to cave in on them. And it isn't just there as well. It's schools and it is hospitals as well. I just feel as though something has gone catastrophically wrong there. GBviews at gbnews.uk.